Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope all the audience had valuable insights from the day one session. And today we have yet another set of exciting discussions lined up. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this session, Bridging the Equity Gaps, RWE Strategies to Improve Representation Across Diverse Populations. We all know that clinical trials often fall short when it comes to including the full diversity of patients. That means that certain groups don't get the same visibility in research, which can lead to treatments that don't always reflect the realities. And this is where real world evidence gives its chance to change that by capturing data from everyday healthcare setting and shining light on those who don't have historically have been left out. So in this session, our panel will share strategies and examples of how RWE can close equities gaps and ensure healthcare research and solutions are more inclusive and fair. So I'd like to introduce the moderator for this session, Janak Joshi. He's an entrepreneur, technology leader, a healthcare innovator with a track record of building next-gen AI and data networks. Janak has held senior leadership roles and in Life Image, global head. He has been global head of real-world evidence product strategy at Deloitte, VP of CVS Caremark. He has successfully raised and exited venture backed by Tier 1 Venture Capital and served as an advisor to health systems, Fortune 50 enterprises, and global startups. Currently, he's driving AI-enabled digital experiences with Commonwealth of Massachusetts, while also serving a board member and mentor to future leaders in healthcare and technology. I would like to introduce our speaker, Phani Veeranki. He is a senior director and principal consultant at Optum with expertise in healthcare data science, real-world evidence, and precision medicine. With over a decade of experience across Optum, Precision Medicine Group, and Premier Inc., he has led research, consulting, innovation initiatives driving value-based healthcare. He also serves as an adjunct faculty at the University of Texas Medical Branch, mentoring future professionals in public health and healthcare analytics. Next, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Ashley Jaksa. She recently joined as a principal research partnership at Target RWE. Prior to that, was working as VP of Evidence Solutions at Etion, subject matter expert in real-world evidence generation, advising biopharma clients and partnering with global regulatory and HT agencies to develop and advance the use of real-world in decision-making. With a strong background in analytics and health policy, Ashley has presented her research at leading international forums including ESPOR, HTA, and AMCP. Next, I'd like to introduce Grace McNamara, a health, physical activity, and technology innovator with over 24 years of experience across Europe, Middle East, Africa, India, and US. Sorry. Grace has spent 12 years at Apple, leading global health and fitness initiatives, and later served advisors as CEO of Ex-Aetion, a medtech company focused on exercises for chronic condition. She currently advises and serves as boards including the US Physical Activity Alliance, Europe Active, and Sports Tech Ireland, driving innovation. So over to you, Janak, to take on this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Divya. Really appreciate it. Thank you, panel, for participating in this very important topic, much debated, much discussed, and very rapidly evolving. I would at least start this conversation because there are different perceptions about what diversity is and how diversity is defined. But I'd like to start with Grace, if you don't mind kicking us off, to say, what is your kind of definition of diversity and how do we define each other? And the reason why this question is important is because depending on the therapeutic area and depending on who you ask, the definition kind of varies tremendously and not just within a single organization function, but even across multiple different organizations. So asking an epidemiologist versus a clinical researcher versus the head of commercial, the definition of diversity kind of varies. So let's at least level the playing field and get to how do we think about diversity? Go ahead.
It is a great question, and there's many layers to this, Janak, as we've talked about before. I think the perception is often the very simple level of gender, ethnicity, race, age, and I think that's just way too high a level for the world we live in today. I think we need to go, much deeper. I mean, and I say that knowing that we have the ability right now to not only have blood tests, but we have hormone tests, we have variabilities across every single age, gender category that you can think of. So we need to go a whole other level deeper. And I also think of diversity diversity as what's different in my life. So if I lined up 100 women, our lives are very different. And even if we're the exact same age, from the exact same country, with the exact same ethnicity, we're very different. Our physiology is quite different. So diversity to me is the layers of depth of each and every person. And when we come to thinking about clinical trials, real world evidence and real world impact is going to be driven by, real world data. So we need that real world data that's clinically measured as well as self-reported side by side for that diversity of data to be used. I think that's very important, especially as we look at, when medications, for example, are going to be precision medicine is the future, right? Precision medicine requires precision for each person, and that requires a lot of data for a lot of people across a longitudinal data set. So yeah, diversity is deep. It's very deep, and I think we need to get well past the perception that it's 3 or 4 categories and we can tick a box on a form at the start of a trial.
I think you're on
Can't
mute.
hear you.
You're on mute.
Janak.
Ashley, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, so I would absolutely agree with Grace that we need to think about different aspects of diversity. So clinical diversity, like what's your family history? What are your different comorbidities? There's treatment and environmental diversity in terms of insurance type, maybe healthcare accessibility. There's lots of social determinants of health, like living conditions, lifestyle, and so forth. And so we need to take all of these into account when we're trying to understand the effectiveness of products. Now, can we take them all of these different levels into account in a clinical trial? Probably not. Those clinical trials are going to be very expensive, very large, very time consuming if we're trying to stratify results against all these different permutations of diversity. But that's where I think real world evidence really plays a role. So once those clinical trials end and we know that a drug can be safe and can work, I think we need to further that evidence generation in real world data, real world evidence to really understand the impact of these products and their effectiveness and safety on all the different dimensions of diversity.
Phani?
Yeah, so this is a great question to start with, Janak. So I would love to add on Grace and Ashley's points. So 2 things that come up to my mind. So one thing is like how RWD will supplement the diversity in a clinical trial. At the same time, can also be a complement as well. So how do we bring that patient selection criteria from diverse populations to the clinical trial through RWD? Or in situations where that isn't possible, so how can RW play a role bringing that diverse population as a control arm to an intervention in a clinical trial? So it can either complement it or it can supplement it. So, and you asked a great question. So diversity is something that is different across different teams, across different sectors. So commercial and branding teams or the market access team think diversity is a different way, and clinical trial or the clinical development thinks in different way, and HR, real world evidence, has a different ideas or concepts and diversity. But we also have to understand, ultimately, once a drug is approved, it's important for the drug to be accessed by every individual that is in need, whether the patient is of different race, sex, gender, and different diverse population. So that is what is an end point, like an end goal, to reflect back on it. So is that the drug really efficacious or effective in a real world setting to a specific patient in a different race, ethnicity population who is not included in the clinical trial? So how do we get there? So our end goal is where the trial recruits mostly Caucasian males and females versus the drug is heavily being needed by an African American female, but is there a well representation for that diverse population in a clinical trial? So I'm just thinking like 2 concepts, like how does RWD supplement and complement a clinical trial? At the same time, how do we think backwards about the end goal of if a patient getting access to the drug once it is approved, and how do we recruit the same type of patient in the future clinical trials? So I think it's like building on the next clinical trial based on the previous experiences. So I think this is a good start for discussion. So
yeah, it's a great point, Phani. I mean, some of the themes that the three of you shared kind of spans across how do you go beyond the demographic profile? How do you go beyond the social determinants of health? And most importantly, how do you identify kind of different structures of access, affordability, workflows, et cetera, that are being delivered in the clinic? As Grace very rightly pointed out, that even within the country of Ireland, you could live in Dublin and you could see two different physicians at two different facilities and have a completely diverse experience or outcomes, even while having the same medication. So how do those patients experience kind of different delivery methodologies or different interventions? It becomes very important. And from an RWE perspective, I've always mentioned this in the industry, that one of the biggest gaps that I really wish all of you on the call understand, the biggest gap is nobody is capturing workflow information. There is no RWE associated with workflows. You can have objective structured data from ICD-10 codes to CPT codes, et cetera. But if somebody says like, well, under what circumstances and what time series was the diagnosis established? Nobody has the answer to that. And normalizing that in RWE trial is incredibly important going forward. So thank you for sharing the thoughts. So building on that, achieving diversity in clinical trials has always been a big topic, especially over the last 5-6 years post-pandemic. What has been some of the biggest challenges, but more importantly, how each one of your organizations are thinking about mitigating those challenges? So we have the traditional challenges of community engagement. We have had the challenges of trust. We've had the challenges of participation, et cetera. But what's the mitigation? What are some of the new challenges that you guys are observing in 2025 and beyond? So Phani, if we continue with you, if you don't mind sharing.
So trust is a critical one. So that has always been a part of like getting this diverse recruitment from diverse populations. So patient advocacy groups are a great mitigation and partnership with different academic medical centers. How do we get this patient population from diverse communities and disadvantaged communities to get them recruited in the clinical trial? So trust is a major factor that I have noticed in my current job, as well as being an academician at UT Medical Center as well. So, and the other critical thing is what I have noticed, like, where are these patients? So are we even capturing those patients in the real world settings? And are we even trying to enroll them appropriately? Because even getting a trial patient into a trial is a tedious task, because appropriately identifying and locating a patient is a critical task. And I think we have moved away from centralized clinical trials to decentralized clinical trials. I think that has kind of eased a bit with so many data assets and coming together to identify where is a patient located and exactly how far is it from the site for a clinical trial, and how can we just get the patient. I think that has eased a bit in the past few years, but this has been a major issue when we are trying to do some studies or enroll clinical trials in rare diseases. But trust, access, and always the engagement has always been the major ones. In 2025, we have been seeing more about like a broader political dimension about, like, for example, vaccines. So if somebody is doing a vaccine-based clinical trial or vaccine-based study, the biggest question is like, will the vaccine even work for me? So that has always been there, even in the political climate and geographical political climate, that also influences the trust among the clinical trial participants. So that is looming a bit. So again, from a mitigation perspective, I think community engagement and patient advocacy groups are always a strong network.
No, fantastic. Grace?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think trust is obviously huge for sure. I mean, one of the biggest things for me is the fragmentation. Like, we look at, there's a clinical trial for one condition, one drug, and it may often ignore all of the other variables that a person might have. As we know, when people have more than one condition, they're typically on more than one drug as well. And obviously all of the diversity topics we talked about. So the fragmentation of data, I think, is a big challenge. And you asked the question, or what are we doing around it? So, Elfie is ultimately a platform, a health super app that's trying to pull together all of the fragmentation. So you report everything and anything, whether it's around your lifestyle or your conditions or your adherence to medication, your side effects, your symptoms, but also looking at you have the option to opt into clinical trials as well. So, and you have the control of that data to share with that clinical trial. So much bigger, broader data sets. But the fragmentation, I think, is a huge factor, right? And to your point, Fanny, if I don't trust the drug or the clinical trial, I'm not going to attend real world evidence based upon that drug either. So it's self-fulfilling fragmentation if we don't address it up front and we don't build trust in the real world, and then we build trust in the clinical trials, which then hopefully becomes a flywheel of trust where you do get diversity of people attending and sharing and willing to share their data from every aspect of their life in order for it and I say pay it forward. I mean, majority of trials that I participate in is not for me, it's for somebody else. And I think if we can build that, I trust my data to be used for the right reason. And I trust that it's me, and me is represented by many, many, many people, then we can build a flywheel. But the fragmentation, I think, is an issue that layers into the trust. And if we have to address one, we have to address both of them together. I think that's a huge factor.
All right, Ashley.
Yeah, so echo the trust. And I think one aspect that can help with that trust is really including physicians, including patients earlier in the process. So not using them as just kind of a cog in the wheel, making sure that they are involved in the collection of data and why this data is being collected, showing them the benefit of real world evidence and real world data, and how their data contributes to this idea of bringing diversity and understanding how this drug is going to work in actual people that aren't necessarily those that are enrolled in clinical trials. So I think that kind of helps with the trust issue. I also think where you go to enroll folks in clinical trials, where you go to seek real world data is important as well. So it's not just those large, big medical academic centers that are in large cities, right? We're thinking about going out into more of the community where the majority of Americans live. So I think that helps as well for folks to see themselves represented in the science. I think that helps both with trust, but also with the generalizability of the findings. And I think that's something that Target is really working on is contracting with not only these large academic medical centers, but contracting with smaller community hospitals to collect data that is relevant for patients. But one last point is I would say this: the collection of data and not being overly onerous on the patient and on the physician. So what is that right balance? And thinking about how are we collecting the information that we absolutely need, and then what might be slightly nice to have, but not making the burden, not making it always on the backs of the patients and the physicians. Are there other ways of collecting some of this data, AI or advanced analytics? How can we use those tools to potentially collect other data points?
No, that's a fantastic point, Ashley. I mean, the thing about trust and patient advocacy is probably sits at the helm of everything else. But historically, majority of the clinical trials have occurred in large academic medical centers and IDNs. They haven't really proliferated into community health centers and even in retail health, for that matter. I mean, there were big advances that were being made by Walmart for Target, Walgreens in partnership with VillageMD, et cetera, and even CVS Caremark, but they haven't really materialized in scale and in kind of normalizing kind of the opposite of defragmentation of all the data that Grace was mentioning. But I think community health centers and retail health are kind of should be an extension going forward. So thank you for sharing the thought. So, I mean, building on some of these challenges and how we have and how we are trying to mitigate it. Relying on patient-reported data has always been kind of inconsistent. Has been fraught with like quality issues, fragmentation issues, etc. So two thoughts. are genetic biomarkers and or reliance on synthetic data, everybody's talking about digital twins, etc. Can they serve as a proxy for establishing diversity? And if so, what is the level of accuracy presented across therapeutic areas when you think about genetic biomarkers as a proxy to race and ethnicity? I'm not a clinician and I'm not a biologist, or a geneticist, so it's tough for me to say. But I would at least start by saying that somehow some of these e-commerce platforms know that I'm from an Indian origin. I have never shared that information with them. I have no idea how they know that. DoorDash always sends me coupons for Indian restaurants. And it always says, hey, it's Diwali, you should eat some sweets. So clearly they know my race and my ethnicity, and I have absolutely no idea how they're finding it. But, translating that analogy to a little more scientific argument, would love to have your thoughts. Actually, if you want to continue with the conversation and share some of your learnings over the past.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of experience of my prior life at Ex-Aetion around the use of synthetic data. The synthetic data is built off of real data, right? And so we have to have good collection and be confident that the real data is correct, high quality, and relevant to the research question in order for synthetic data to ever work. So I think we absolutely need to strengthen our systems for collecting high quality real world data before we can talk about how synthetic data can make large strides forward. In terms of genetic biomarkers, again, I think it goes back to the collection of that information. If we're collecting that across large groups of folks, I definitely think that it can help determine different aspects of diversity. But again, I think it all goes back to that data collection.
Grace?
Yeah, I'm totally with Ashley on this one. What's interesting, Janak, and I often see is the collection of data, to your point around self-reported data. But like you asking me today how I felt for the last 6 months, how I've been, or have I been active, or what my side effects have been, is just useless, right? So we have to think more actively. That collecting self-reported data today and every day for the next 6 months is much more accurate, right? And you obviously see tracks and trends in that. So daily collection of data and self-reported data is absolutely necessary. There's no way for me to share my pain scores otherwise. Right, there's no point, and it needs to be daily, and it needs to be in conjunction with what I'm taking, how I'm acting, where am I, and everything else. Again, all that data needs to be side by side and correlated, because otherwise it's just how have you been? We need to get past that. And I think what's interesting for me is, like, pretty much every fluid that your body has, or every fluid that leaves your body today, there is a medical test to test it at home. So the good news is the home tests are medically validated, right? There's abilities for it to link to clinics and labs all over the world. And there's much better ways to reach people in the community at home, make it easy on the person in participating in the trial, but then also on the research team as well as the clinician. So I think we need to do better as well of getting to the people at home to collect that data on a very active daily, if not hourly rate, depending on the metric. And that's where what we can do today. We couldn't do this 5 years ago. So I think we're in a very different time, and I think we need to up our standards, right? Where we're asking people to report an awful lot more, but seamlessly at home where it's comfortable for them to do so, while building that transparency of why all this data is valuable, and it's not maybe for you. Right? It's not for you as the individual, it's for everyone like you, or in some variable that you have. So I think that's really, really important. But I'm totally with Ashley on this one. If we have really great data set as a standard, as a baseline, then static data and working on that data is much more powerful and effective. That's my perception of it.
Phani?
Yeah, so I would like to add on a couple of things. So I think synthetic controls or synthetic data it's evolving. So it's not up to date that every clinical trial can easily be designed with a synthetic data or synthetic control. So as Ashley mentioned, so we need to have a proper real world data to even build a synthetic control. But I think we have come to a certain point that we can build a synthetic control or synthetic data using the existing data from claims or EMRs or some registries. But definitely, as Grace pointed out, we still don't have the PRO measures. For example, do you have the pain scores? Do you have the depression scores? Do you have any other scores that has been collected daily as a PRO measure that you can build a synthetic cohort from? So I think there's a huge I think we have made some great strides into building synthetic data from existing claims, EHR, and registries, but that is not sufficient for a clinical trial. So because we need the daily measures of lab measures like PROs and quality of life and everything. Of course, quality of life is not an element within the clinical trial, but that can be collected in the real world as well. That's a critical entity that something that real world can offer or supplement to a clinical trial. But I think that area will continue to evolve. So as we continue to build that synthetic controls and by using multiple data assets, multimodal data, and bringing all together. And going back to other point of like, can a genotypic biomarker be a proxy for a diverse individual in clinical trial? So typically, being a clinician, so the phenotype, which is an external variant, is always being represented by a genotype, so which is a biomarker or anything. So in some situations, yes, because you will have a genetic signal for a specific race and ethnicity that can be identified on a gene panel or a whole genome sequencing that can pretty much establish that this is a patient of an Mexican female patient that has a higher signal for a specific risk factor for a disease condition. That is already seen, but it's not necessary that it's consistent for all disease areas. So there are several examples where that genetic biomarker will act as a proxy for the phenotype, but it's not necessary. But the biggest question is, if you ask it, while collecting the data, if you can collect simple measures like race, ethnicity, like social demographic determinants of health, transportation access, financial access, that is much simpler versus getting a genetic testing done for every patient to get in a clinical trial. So we need to understand the pros and cons as well as balance between how much upfront cost that would take to run a genetic panel versus simply collecting data to the highest level of quality, curate it, make it transparent, make it available for multiple like AI tools and everything to pull it from multiple data sources to recruit a patient population. So I think it all depends on who has deep pockets versus who can just collect the data really well. But those are great points. But I think the field is moving forward. That's what I would say in synthetic controls at this point.
I mean, I'm still very bullish on the fact that if you fast forward 3 years or 4 years, that we will have enough intelligence to kind of identify what your race, ethnicity, and background is. I'm also bullish on the fact that all the continuous monitoring systems of how you respond to blood pressure meds and how you measure in your blood pressure cuff will contribute to establishing variability and diversity. And I'm also seeing a lot of new technologies get funded based on the actual photographs that you have to submit as a part of the clinical trial, and they photograph you, and based on the picture, they can actually tell you what origin you're in. The biggest challenge is for Europeans, where facial features are not a primary determinant of your race or ethnicity or geographic background. For example, Grace could look like she's from New York. Nobody would be able to tell that, she's from Limerick. But and nobody could tell that, I'm sitting here in Boston or Bombay or where I'm residing. It's very difficult. But I think those technologies are getting better, and there's a lot to come. I know we have a few more minutes remaining, so I want to focus on, what's in everybody's mind. Advancement in digital health and AI coupled with RWE. How is technology, if at all, shaping our proliferation into establishing diversity? Are we using AI tools to establish that, or is that still very kind of low on the maturity curve? Any kind of concluding thoughts on that would be fantastic for the audience.
Yeah, I can start. So I can share some of the initiatives that we have been thinking and we have been planning to do, and we have some of the things we have already implemented at Optum Life Sciences and Optum. So right now, the race and ethnicity data is patient reported within Optum data asset. So primarily we receive it. So, but at the same time, we can also do some modeling, so which we're thinking ahead, and but some of the things are still initiative. So some of the predictive models will allow you to also predict a patient's race much early on. That's something is available. So you can do some modeling work over it. At the same time, right now we do use natural language processing to extract the information from provider nodes that captures the race, not on the race ethnicity, but various social determinants of health data, and also incorporate into our data assets that is made readily available for our life science partners to use it. So we develop, we deploy several natural language processing models to collect that information, not only race and ethnicity data, but also we have right now 5 major indices, like social determinants of indices, that we extract the information from a combination of natural language processing extraction from the clinical nodes, but also consumer data as well. For building these all things, we need these digital tools, because it comes from multiple data, because it's not a single source of data, because we have to get the consumer data regarding like their financial security, the food access, the transportation access, how far they are from the closest medical center, how far they are from the closest site center. These are all, everything has to come together. So we have some major initiatives in improving the quality of the data, and also curation of the data. It's not only about the quality, but also curation, make it transparent, and also make it transportability as well. So because that's what makes it a rigorous real world data asset that can be used for multiple things. And we are planning, and we have several initiatives that enhance the diversity of patient population within our real world data assets.
No, thank you, Phani. And very quickly, in the interest of time, Grace and Ashley, if you want to share, where is AI playing a role?
Well, what's interesting for me is, Fanny, that's exactly what Elfie is building, right? Is that ability for it to be real world, but also for the ability for that data set to be used in 10, 12, 20, different trials at the one time. Because most patients, if they're willing to be part of one trial, they're probably willing to be part of more. You just got to make it super simple and easy, right? I shared that data set once. Here's my genetic profiling. Use it as at will in one way, without it obviously being controversial. So I think the element for me is, Janak, we have more data than we've ever had before. We have tools and the ability now to not only provide insights back to the person in real time, but we can also then share that data seamlessly. And that's where I think we have the ability to collect more, analyze more, use it more effectively for better, and I would say cheaper clinical trials as well, because there's a bigger data set up front. And I think we might need a mindset shift on recruitment of people for trials, knowing that we have data sets, we have people that are already opting in for the good of themselves as well as others. And I think we have just a rethink that we don't need to recruit every single patient for every single clinical trial the same way today as we did 5 years ago. That's vastly different. And that's because of the AI and the tools and the ability to analyze that data more effectively.
Fair enough. Ashley?
Yeah, so I would just add, obviously, totally agree that, drug discovery, predictive models, NLP to get data out of notes, those are all super important. I think a couple things that were not mentioned is, Grace mentioned kind of the fragmentation of data, the use of AI and the use of more advanced analytics to link data together, to go and find a patient that's recruited in the clinical trial, to go and find their real world data, link that real world data and bring it into the system. Also, I think what is not necessarily sexy, but what really can rely on AI is bringing all this data together into a particular data model. So ingesting the data so that we have one particular data set that we can analyze. I think that relies a lot on advancements in technology and AI, so that we can bring those disparate sources of data together to be a useful data set.
Okay. Fantastic. And the last question is the partnerships for diversity initiatives. What partnerships has actually worked when you think about patient advocacy groups, academic researchers, technology vendors, and what has been kind of the left field, unknown partnership ecosystems that we are not talking about, but we should in the industry? initially CROs kind of served as kind of the clearinghouse for recruitment and technology-driven kind of data collection. How do we go beyond CROs? Like, what's the plan for the next 3 to 4 years when you think about the type of partners that you would want to include in your trials? That would be something that is much debated. I was recently on a call with a major pharma company, and they were struggling with this conversation, saying, should we partner with direct-to-patient engagement platforms? And my first question was like who? Who are you talking about? And they communicated to me saying, well, we don't really know, and we are trying to hire people, kind of understand the landscape, etc. But would love to get their thoughts. And, because I mentioned direct-to-patient, Grace, if you don't mind sharing your thoughts at Elfie and the kind of partners you would want to engage with, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, we're working an awful lot with different systems, obviously, in relation to being able to pull in that data as well. So lab reporting, for example, you can upload your lab reports from any lab, and the ability to sync any data with any variable as well. It all works, right? That all works today. So the ability to collect more is absolutely important. But what's interesting for me is when we work with a lot of pharmaceutical companies, exactly into the point that we've been talking about, is trying to build better clinical trials, shorter, faster, better data sets, more effective, and precision healthcare. Right? Everyone's trying to do the same thing in one way, is get to how to make sure we get precision healthcare, so we get to value-based reimbursement that is a no-brainer, right? I mean, that's the reality we're heading towards. So value-based reimbursement has to have precision healthcare first. Otherwise, it's not going to work, and it's not going to be an economic model that's sustainable. But one that's interesting for me as well, Janak, is the government, right? There's a bunch of restrictions around the world around being able to collect some of this data. We talked about ethnicity or samples and so on. So in order to work, I think, globally, knowing that we are looking at people globally and we all move around the world, I think partnership actually with government is necessary. And it's absolutely necessary to look at why that data is valuable and what the restrictions are, and building that, again, trust and transparency of what the data would be used for, how it would be used for, so we can literally get to precision healthcare regardless where you are in the world, whether you're an Indian in Boston or you're an Indian in India. That data needs to be evaluated and used in different trials. So I think the partnerships, the tech side is easy because tech will work together, and there's APIs for everything and anything, and that's definitely possible today. Obviously, working with the pharmas to work with government together, I think it's like a three-way conversation in many ways, so we can get to what does the data need to be fully diverse, and how is it safe and protected and transparent to build trust, and to make sure that it's used in a global setting. It's important.
So I've been thinking, I think Grace covered most of my points. But at the same time, one thing that we have been noticing, so from this is the current experience, is like, okay, so we have come far away, like identifying patients using real world data. Where are our clinical trial participants? We have multiple sources, tons and tons of data. We can just curate. We have just deploy several AI models. But after that, the next question is like, how do we get these access to these patients? For example, one patient might be in seeing a physician in Kansas City, versus the second patient might be seeing someone, a provider in San Diego, with the different healthcare systems. But these healthcare systems don't talk to each other to even access the data, to bring the data to understand whether this patient is a true patient for recruiting clinical trial or not. So the biggest question is like, can we come up with a platform where the patient themselves can share their like Epic ID or CertDir ID and share the data voluntary, so that it just keeps compiling. That will allow us to appropriately identify a patient in a clinical trial using the patient selection criteria based on the protocols and everything. And because right now the immediate concern that we are trying to address is like, how do these patients get access to all this being recruited in a clinical trial? Because and then the site-based and everything comes down, because we are moving away from a site-based recruitment strategy to a non-site-based recruitment strategy using different partners like Minute Maid clinics, CVS clinics, and even small community clinics from academic medical centers. I think everyone is making strides, but bringing everything together into one single platform or a framework is really critical, because every patient and healthcare systems, trust me, like they don't want to share data. Of course, that is pretty much evident because of data security, and the security of of letting the PHI go. I mean, it's really critical because we don't want the PHI to be disclosed to someone else. So health systems doesn't talk, but can we build something like a framework where every patient who is interested in participating in a clinical trial share their information, have their healthcare data accessed, come into a single portal that can be accessible to everyone, and based on the selection criteria, you can recruit them in a clinical trial. So that's something is real need right now because healthcare systems don't talk.
And just to add to that, Janet, before we move on to Ashley with that one, I find that's exactly the vision that I see as well. And that's exactly what Elfie is building. Because to your point, if we give the patient, the person, all of their data, then they have the ability to consent to share it in multiple different ways, seamlessly, effectively, and efficiently. And it makes it much easier for the pharma partner as well as anyone else who's contributing to the research. So watch this space.
No, I think the patient-driven, fully consented cohort registry is a very real topic. It has been talked about not just in the United States but even elsewhere. In fact, the talk I'm giving in Seoul, South Korea next week is exactly on this topic: is how do you build an RWE network with a public-private collaboration that is more patient-centric. That is the entire talk for an hour and a half. So yes, this one question is of tremendous interest, not even outside of the U.S. and particularly in Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, etc. And the therapeutic area of focus there is going to be in oncology and specifically non-small cell lung cancer. So more than happy to share some of those notes with participants of what the learnings are, because that's very important. But Ashley, any thoughts on the partnership model and previous experiences at Aetion and now at Target RWE? What are you guys looking at? Who are you looking at?
Yeah, so I mean, I would really echo everything that Grace and Phani has said, especially the idea of this larger kind of cohort, patient cohort, and the patients owning their own data, not only healthcare data, but also data from wearables, right? I have probably 3 trackers on right now that probably knows a lot more than I do about my health than my doctor does or my provider does. So absolutely kind of echo what has already been said.
No, fantastic. So, some concluding thoughts. We're a couple of minutes away from top of the half hour. I think, everything that was shared here has practical implications on what each of us intend on doing once we go back to our desks today, tomorrow, depending on the time zone you're in. But I would say that looking at the tools that you have at your disposal on the AI side, what is the underlying and baseline data that you're referencing? Where is that information coming from? But more importantly, going beyond the structured data assets that you have access to. I don't care if you're partnered with Datavant or HealthVerity or Komodo Health or what have you. I think going beyond just imaging data, lab data, medication data, diagnostic data, and looking at the workflows and looking and actually asking the patient, saying, what is actually working for you and who are you at the end of the day, is probably one of the most important kind of questions over the next several years. I personally talked to the CEO of almost every major CRO before this talk and asked them, how do you collect race and ethnicity information? And almost everybody said, oh, we just rely on the patient and we ask them that information, but we have no other proxy. But we are hoping to change that with our partnership model and some of the tools at our disposal. I would also say that, companies like Target RWE and even the work at Optum and really innovative companies like Elfie are paving the way of what the roadmap is going to look like when we think about diversity. One of the companies I'm a big fan of that has done, a lot of work in the diversity space is Locovant, which is a part of the Roivant ecosystem. So I would encourage you guys looking at Locovant too. But I think this is the most important topic. I'll leave you with one anecdote that when Moderna and J&J were developing the vaccine, more than 93 or 94% of the participants were Caucasian. However, when the vaccines were being administered for first-line health workers, more than 30% of the health workers were not Caucasian. In fact, they were of Indian origin. 22% were from Indian origin. And we had less than 0.1% of Indian origin participants in the vaccine trials. So that variance, and that it leaves you with a dichotomous mindset saying, well, that did not make any sense. And what kind of safety issues came out of that? What kind of efficacy issues came out of that? Nobody knows the long-term implications from that. So I think the safety, efficacy, effectiveness, accuracy, quality implications, and even pricing for that matter, has a heavy dependency on diversity as you go forward. But with that, I will thank the panel for sharing their thoughts. Amazing work and amazing thought process here. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And Divya, if you want to
Yes.
round out the conversation.
Yes, I'll just conclude. Thank you to our panelists for the perspectives and the audience for being a part of this discussion. Two things that I take away is that what does diversity truly mean? As Grace and Ashley just said, it is beyond race and ethnicity. It's to include factors like environment, clinical characteristics, health accessibility, and much more. And as we discussed, to achieve this true representation, we must partner with patient advocacy groups, understand where these diverse patient populations are coming from, build trust with them, and not just rely on academic medical centers, but also engage with community centers, which often reflect a broader population who have a diverse patient database. And lastly, it has to be patient-driven, where, as Ashley mentioned, where the patients own the data and they consent to share the data. So I think from today's session, the message is loud and clear. We have to leverage real-world evidence. We have the power to reshape healthcare to close these equity gaps. So with that, I thank all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for including me on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.